Bienvenidas y bienvenidos de nuevo a Canal Economic Zones, aquí en Casa SEAT. Ayer aquí hablábamos en un panel llamado Be Open de la necesaria cooperación entre países para un desarrollo sostenible. Hoy, en el panel BASSOCIATION, hacia una mayor cooperación entre zonas económicas. Para este diálogo híbrido de nuevo, porque tenemos conectados a varios participantes, vamos con Eric Autor desde Washington. Good afternoon, Eric.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning from here in Washington.
Good morning. Ahmed Beniz desde Marruecos. Hello again, Ahmed.
Hola. ¿Cómo
Hola.
estamos? Bien.
Muy bien, muy bien. Y
Gracias.
Gustavo González desde Tenerife. Hola de nuevo, Gustavo.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien,
Encantado de
estamos.
participar una vez más.
Un placer para nosotros también. Y contamos con la moderación de Jorge Alberto Díaz Rivera, International Project Manager, responsable de contenidos de este canal y mi jefe. Aquí lo tenemos, a mi vera. Hola, Jorge. Uy,
hola, Ana.
Me pongo nerviosa y todo.
Muchas gracias, Ana.
Moderarás bien, ¿eh?
Esperamos
Espero
que sí.
mucho de ti, ¿eh?
Así será.
Cero presión, ¿eh?
Cero presión.
Todo tuyo, adelante.
Marhaba, welcome, bienvenidos. Dobra Pajalovic. It's a pleasure to have this panel today, and especially these panelists with us. I'm very happy and proud to be here with you. We have among us Mr. Ahmed Beniz. He is the Secretary General of the African Economic Zone Organization. He's a graduate of Business and Economics from Heck University in Paris. Welcome, Ahmed.
Thank you. Thank you, Jorge.
We also have among us Mr. Eric Otter. He is the president of the North American Free Trade Zone Association. He's a graduate in business and government from Duke University and London School of Economics. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
And finally, we have the president of the ASFA, who is the Latin American Free Zone Association, Mr. Gustavo González de Vega, who is a graduate in law from the University Menendez Pelayo in Spain. Welcome, Gustavo.
Thank you, Jorge.
Well, it's been a very interesting debate so far, and now we're going to focus a little bit more on the regional aspects. How has COVID impacted the free zones and the associations in your region? So I'm going to start with Ahmed, and I would like to ask Ahmed, how does the African free zones have reacted to this pandemic that we're living currently today?
Thank you, Jorge. And first of all, I would like to thank the organization team for inviting us to attend this wonderful event. And of course, I wanted to extend my thanks to the organization team of the BNU and also the panelists. I'm the Secretary General of the Africa Economic Zones Organizations and also the Group Business Development Directors of Tangemed, which is one of the largest economic zones in the African continent. Let me start by sharing some insights on the development of the economic zones in the continent. So our organizations is the representative of this economic zones community. We gather more than 80 members representing 45 African countries. And as of today, more than 189 economic zones have been developed in the continent, and 57 projects have been announced for completions. But since its inception, the African special economic zones have given a significant boost to attract FDI and to create an attractive investment conditions supporting job creations. Over the last 5 years, more than 60 million jobs have been created in several activity sectors, agro-processing, industrial fields, and services. The African economic zones are also facing an uncertain period as COVID-19 disrupts their activities and hinder their operations due to lockdown restrictions. Most of them are reliant on manufacturing and export-led activities. So business continuity plan has been implemented in order to support the industrial operations, getting product to market, and granting access to raw material. And the business continuity plan consists on a series of security and safety measures that aims to preserve the security and safety of employees while meeting the demand of the economic zones operators. So the economic zones managers have implemented, together with the industrialists, the major recommendation of the World Health Organizations. So there were a task force committee that has been set. Of course, social distancing, body temperatures, disinfection of road and building. But what was significant is, let's say, the digitizations of several operations, including invoicing, payments, the one-stop services that has been 100% digitized. And this also was developed in parallel with the large awareness raising campaign and, of course, training sessions that has been provided to the economic zones operators. But the crisis may also be considered as an opportunity to reconsider the regional value chain and the industrial integration involving the economic zones. I mean, the African economic zones as the driver to implement innovative solutions and innovative policies. So the global pandemic has put the diversification of the global value chain at a center stage. And the economic zones is the major stakeholders to implement those policies. Though the new wave of the global supply chain will definitely provide new opportunity to expand into new fields of activities and lead to new stimulus through attracting new investment and improving the market demand. So in that sense, we are entitled to develop new processes of the supply chain, supporting the vision of creating one African market under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is, let's say, under implementation today. And this stands for making a significant contribution to reduce trade transactions and facilitate cross-border trade. This would definitely boost the intra-African trade, enhance the Africa's global trade performance, and support regional and continental value chain by contributing to the expansion and diversification of the continent's productive capacity. So we believe within our organization, I mean African Economic Zones Organization, we believe that our community could spread the move to restore the economic activity in the wake of the COVID-19 based on value chain diversification, regional integration, and of course, investments and traction.
It's very interesting how you said that the economic zones are actually acting like a force to unify Africa and African economy. And I would like to pass now to Mr. Eric Otter. There are some key differences on how the economic zones work in the US. And I would like to continue this line of questioning, if you could please explain to us the difference of these economic zones and at the same time tell us how they were affected by this pandemic.
Sure, thank you, Jorge, and I'd like to extend my thanks also for being able to participate on this panel. It's really a great opportunity, and I'm grateful to have a chance to chat about the U.S. Zones program, some of the challenges we're facing, not only from COVID, but from other things as well. So the FTZ program, which, as some of you probably know, is called the Foreign Trade Zone program in the United States, as opposed to free trade zones in other countries, but it's essentially the same sort of system. It's one of the oldest in the world. It was created in 1934, so it's been in existence for quite a long time. We have over 700 active zones and subzones in all 50 states in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. We are principally a duty program. In other words, the main benefits of the U.S. FTZ program are focused on duty reduction, duty elimination, and deferral and payment of duties. So it's very much of a duty structured program that doesn't have some of the tax benefits that a lot of other FTZ programs in other countries do. It is also, one big difference is that while zones are considered in the United States outside of the customs territory of the U.S., but they are for all other purposes, all other legal purposes in the United States jurisdiction. So what that really means is that while the customs rules apply differently inside a foreign trade zone as opposed to outside one, all other rules and regulations of the United States and the individual states and municipalities do apply within the zones. So and the zone system over the years has built a very strong environment of compliance, and they take compliance and the enforcement very seriously, and working with the agencies, the U.S. agencies that regulate the U.S. zone system, which is the U.S. Commerce Department, which houses the Foreign Trade Zone Board, and of course U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So the zones, when you look at the industries that operate inside the zones, they're really a quite varied group of industries, including pharmaceuticals, vehicles and vehicle parts, electronics, oil and petroleum, petrochemicals, textiles and apparel. Operators are both manufacturers and distributors. Some do a combination of both. The zones employ over 440,000 people directly in over 3,300 zone facilities. The FTZ program also is a significant contributor to the economy of the United States. Over 11% of all imports into the U.S. go into foreign trade zones, and nearly 7% of all U.S. exports come from U.S. Foreign trade zones. So that's just a quick overview of the program and some of the differences in our program as opposed to how zones operate in other countries. Turning to the question of the COVID pandemic and the response and impact on the U.S. zones, I think as a general statement that the U.S. has managed the whole COVID situation very poorly. There has not been a coordinated federal effort really to speak of. President Trump essentially handed the responsibilities over to the states. That resulted in a very uncoordinated effort to deal with the pandemic, and that has had a general impact throughout the country. We lead the world in the number of infections and deaths. I was just telling Ahmed and Gustavo that we had 50,000 new cases just yesterday in the United States. We are now over 7.5 million in cases since the pandemic started, and over 210,000 deaths. So that, I think, is a really indicative of the impact that it's had on the United States. For zones, when we look back at when the pandemic really first hit last spring, we saw just a drop off the cliff in economic activity. Production essentially ground to a halt, and many people were laid off or furloughed. We still have a very high unemployment rate as a result of COVID. So I'll just take example of the auto sector, which is a very significant part of the zones program. Auto production essentially ceased, and that had a really severe impact, obviously, on that sector and the jobs and the companies. But they weren't the only ones. They were just a good example. Things started to revive after May over the summer, but then we've been seeing since August a real uptick in cases and infections and so forth, which we're concerned is going to start slowing the economy down again. Now, with the zones, it's interesting that we have both a problem of there's fundamentally a challenge in dealing with supply chains, because in the spring, as things were slowing down in the United States, it was starting to pick up again in China. And we realized that there were some severe supply chain bottlenecks that were being created as a result as goods from Asia were coming into the ports but had nowhere to go because our transportation system was adversely impacted. People were not buying anything. The production had shut down, so we were having a buildup of inventory. And we realized that the zones in the U.S. could provide a temporary solution by serving as an entrepot where goods could be stored temporarily, not assess duties, and then withdrawn when needed, when things started to pick up again. So we initiated this effort to provide information on available storage space in zones throughout the country. It was really a very well-received program that we put together sort of very quickly. At the same time, we've also, because of the supply chain bottlenecks, have had shortages as goods have not been, or inputs have not been able to move where they're needed to be positioned. So, for instance, I just read in the paper today that we have a shortage of aluminum cans, which is really impacting beverage production. So it's really been a supply chain challenge for companies generally, but also in the zones. Although the zones, as I mentioned, have provided some unique resources to be able to deal with these supply chain problems. And of course, companies, as Ahmed mentioned, are moving to more toward operating virtually and to the extent that they can. Obviously, when you've got production line workers or warehouse workers, you need bodies in those facilities. But a lot of other operations are occurring remotely. And so companies in the zones have adjusted over the past few months to accommodate this, and it's, you know, I'd say for the most part it's working okay. It's not optimal, but you know, goods are moving in and out of the zones now, and hopefully that will be sustained, and that we don't enter into a new phase on the COVID infection that's really going to start slowing things down again. So I'll end with that, but you know, I'm happy to expand if there are any other questions.
It's quite interesting, Eric, how you tell us that the U.S. free zone are keeping the economy moving, adapting to a situation, and keeping the market open for opportunities and acting as a key element in the supply chain. I would like to go to Gustavo now and ask him what are the main consequences of this pandemic for the Latin American free zones?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Jorge. I thank you for being you. I am so glad to be again here, and congratulations, because this is an amazing event. Congratulations for you, Jorge, for your entire team, Blanca, Pere Navarro. And of course, it's a pleasure for me to share this panel with my friends, Eric and Ahmed. We always working together for our free zones. So, as you know, Jorge, under our association, we have many countries, 26 countries, not only in America, we have in 2 continents, because Spain is part of this association. So the evolution of this pandemic is different on time and geographically, but I think we have for sure one point in common. That's it. The COVID-19 has been the catalyst of digitalization. We are working for a long time in our special economic zones to adapt us to this new industrial revolution 4.0, this digital economy. But right now, we need to adapt us quickly to offer digital services, digital process, digital activities. You can think about, for example, this remote work. Many laborers from our companies inside our free trade zones are working at home. So we need a digital process to control this fact. Or for example, the e-commerce. We need to do easier this process in e-commerce because we are the perfect platform to the free contact economy. So for me, this is the most important point. But in the other hand, also the global economy is changing. We have living for many years under the globalization, and maybe we could call it this period as a slowlyization, decrease in FDI, trade. So the pillars of globalization are changing. For example, from offshoring of multinational company to relocate and reshoring, or from the global value chain to the regional value chain, in which the companies are looking for to be closer than commodities and customers. So everything is changing, and this is the new context in which our free special economic zones show we ahead. So for me, I think the most important trend right now it could be the convergence between special economic zones and science and technology parks. I think it could be the key to attract foreign direct investment to our territory. And I think this is an example in which every of our special economic zones are working. I have speaking about the smart zones, the special economic zones that for digital services. Or for example, Jorge, you, the Zona Franca Barcelona, present just this week the e-zone. I think this is the way, because we need to offer these digital services in this new context, in this new age of the digital economy. And finally, as conclusion, always I prefer don't speak about the impact of this crisis in our special economic zone. I think better is to say how our special economic zones have been helping to mitigate this crisis. We have been working to keep the economy alive, to giving the continuity of the global trade, and I think this is a really important role, not only during this crisis, also, of course, after in the new age, the digital economy context, after this COVID-19.
Your remarks, Gustavo, are remarkable in the sense that the COVID pandemic basically helped to shift the focus of the economic zones, and it's acting like a catalyst to change the industry and making it more dynamic and more e-friendly. But I would like to go back to Eric, because I have a very specific question. What do you see? What do you see in the near future are the main challenges that economic zones are facing in the US? You know that this is we all know that this is an electoral year. We have an election coming up. The president of the United States got infected by the COVID. So there's a lot of things that I would like to hear from you and from the US perspective regarding these challenges for the economic zones.
Well, I would say that our challenges are twofold. Generally, the first obviously is how to manage the COVID pandemic. The second one is the consequences of trade policy and the trade wars that Donald Trump has initiated have really presented some considerable challenges for companies. We've seen a significant increase in duties that are being assessed, and they're being assessed in ways that are very, very unpredictable. These are the tariffs that are on goods from China, but also from the European Union, Canada, many other countries on a wide range of products. Steel and aluminum were hit early on, which had an impact throughout the supply chain. All manufacturers who use steel and aluminum in their manufacturing operations were impacted by those duties. China, of course, is a huge trading partner with the United States, and to have essentially all trade with China subject to significant duties really had a major impact. So we're dealing with the consequences of both the pandemic and the disruptions that it's created in supply chains, and amplified by the administration's trade wars and trade policy, which have been designed to drive to reduce imports and to drive production back to the United States. That is really not panned out, I think, the way the president had expected. The latest trade figures are that actually our merchandise trade deficit is at a record high right now, that we're importing much more than the impact on imports has been much less than the impact on our exports. And as a result, our merchandise trade deficit has really grown considerably. And that in part also is due to the strong dollar. The dollar right now is trading at a very high level compared to other currencies. So all of that is driving a massive trade deficit. But what all this is doing, as Gustavo mentioned, is having a very much of an impact on supply chains and moving suppliers around. We have seen in bilateral trade with China a significant decrease, but that trade is not moving back to the United States. It's moving to other countries, particularly in Asia. And we are seeing reshoring. One of the objectives of the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that replaced the NAFTA was to bring production back to the United States. However, some of the rules of origin in that agreement, particularly in the auto sector, really lead to some skepticism that that's going to happen, that it's really made it very difficult, very complicated and expensive now because of those rules of origin to set up production in the United States. But we really feel that the zone system can help mitigate those impacts, and for companies that are looking to reshore production back in the United States, the Foreign Trade Zone program really presents a safe harbor to be able to do that. But we do have to resolve some outstanding issues related to the Trump tariffs and how they are applied to zones. We've had some real problems with unpredictability about how and when the duties apply to goods in a zone. For instance, if you've got merchandise sitting in a zone, and while it's there outside the customs territory, the duty is increased, decreased, or eliminated administratively, what duty rate applies when the goods are then withdrawn from the zone? That has not been a clearly answered question, and it's something that we're actually having to try to clarify through a legislative proposal. So we do, as Gustavo mentioned, think that the zones program really provides a way to buffer some of these challenges that companies and the U.S. economy are facing. But that's not to say that we don't have our own challenges as a result of the trade policy and the shifts that we're seeing in supply chains moving toward more regional supply chains and local supply chains.
It's quite interesting what you're telling us about the legislative challenges that the free zones are facing in the U.S., particularly in this electoral year. We'll go back later on that point, but I'd like to switch to Ahmed now. Ahmed, we know each other. We are all members of the World Free Zone Organization. We met in several meetings talking about the associations, the future of free zone associations. How do you see the future of the free zones associations globally? I mean, here we have the three major players of the Atlantic Free Zones Association, but how do you see it from your African perspective? It will be very interesting to know.
I think that there is no way without implementing fruitful collaboration and cooperations between, let's say, the representative of the continental economic zones. And this goes by sharing, of course, different views, resources, skills, applying intelligence and the strength to discuss great many issues, identifying areas of cooperations and accomplish objectives and goals by coordinating and collaborating together. This should not be a wish, but a will. And we are here not to share announcements or statements of good faith, but I think it's time to move forward and identify concrete actions and maybe joint project initiatives that could address issues of common interest. I would suggest maybe 5 major actions that could be undertaken easily. First of all, connecting the economic leaders and expanding their network through, let's say, social media referencing, joint promotion initiatives, and any activities that can connect the economic zones leaders to each other across the globe, across the world, not only at the continental level. We already do that in Africa, and it's time to, let's say, expand it to, let's say, the neighboring organizations or to our partners. Second is to improve the capacity building and expertise sharing through the setup of joint training sessions, webinars, conferences. We have done this exercise before, but we should maybe duplicate it more and more. And I mean, we have definitely many topics that we could address jointly, because at the end of the day, we are facing the same problem and the same challenges. The third action could be the setup of a knowledge collaborative framework that could lead to, let's say, the realization of benchmark, survey, assessment, analysis. And this is very important when you are making a benchmark with, let's say, and also learning from others' experience. The setup of this collaborative framework could be very helpful to all of us. Fourth actions could be designing, let's say, key performance indicators and, let's say, a common standard to comply with. And this could take into consideration, of course, the local context or the continental context, but this would at least harmonize somehow the way that we design, that we develop special economic zones, and by making a list of specific requirements for that. And the fifth actions could be advocating, lobbying with international institutions. And this is all for the benefit of the special economic zones development, supporting its missions, and of course, attending the common objectives. So collaborations definitely build strong relationship. It breaks down the wall between partners to make the most of of mutual beneficial assets, and sharing, of course, new opportunities of partnership, not only between the existing partners, which is the case already. We do have some ongoing partnership with ASFA, with the World Free Zone organizations, but also it's the opportunity to set up successful partnership with new partners and also connecting our economic zones. So even if things don't work out, the valuable lessons that we learn will always help us to do better next time, for sure.
That's very interesting, because you're talking about reinventing certain parameters of an association that I think we all need to consider as global leaders, as you need to consider as global leaders of the economic zones. And I would like to go back to Gustavo, talking about reinventing yourself. I know that ASFA recently launched a new tool to facilitate trade among the free zones, which is called, if I'm not mistaken, Relocate Latam. I would like if you will be so kind to explain us what is this initiative about. I think, Gustavo, your microphone is off.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
we have you.
Okay. As you know, Jorge, we have two main goals in our association. Is in order to defend our regime and obviously to promote it. So, first of all, to defend our regime in our association, in this big family, as you know, as family, as we like to call us, in this big family in which, of course, I would like to work together, to join with Africa or not, because we have a lot of common goals in Atlantic area, and of course, under umbrella of World Food Zone Organization, we are working and we join many actors, not only special economic zones, also the companies, the governments. We are working together because we believe our voice is stronger all together. And we are working in this moment, in this period, to push, to change the regulation about many of the actual currently normative legal procedures, not only in our countries, in our government, also by multilateral institutions. So I think this is a really important moment to work together, as Ahmed said, is so important for sure, to defend and push the changes, the necessary changes in the regulation. In the order of promote of our regime, as you say, Jorge, this is a period to reinvent us. We are living days in which UNCTAD says about a decrease in FDI between 30 or 40% this year. For example, the World Trade Organization speaks about in 2020 the go down the trade, the global trade, in 30%. So we are talking about less investment, less trade, more competition. So this is the moment to change, and I think this is most important, not only the less trade in this period. Maybe it's more important to know the changes in this trade. For example, for sure, in the next period, will be new markets under a new geopolitical context. Also, new sectors, digital sectors mainly. And finally, new tools for trading. We have been spoken about e-commerce, for example, printing on demand. And finally, the most important thing in this moment is the new commercial and marketing tools, digital tools. This is living a period in which the companies are looking for new location, these regional value chains, and this is the moment to show our offer of our free zones. And this is point in which, as you say, we are develop a special platform, a web page in 5 languages: English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese, in which, in order to promote the available warehouse, offices, and scopes in our free trade zones in the region. In this moment in which it's not possible to visit, presentially visit of the investors, we have to show by the net, by a platform web, our available spaces. And in this web, relocate Latam. You said before, relocate Latam. I want to say it many times for remember every investor. The investor can find categorized by the use for industrial services, logistic. Also, it is for rent or for sale, the number of square meters, every characteristic. So this is the opportunity to show to the investors everything we can offer just in this important moment when in their mind is the new location. And this is only possible right now by internet, digital tools. So it's for that we are so happy, so glad for our association, our Camila Moreno, our general director, our team, because this work has done in only 2 months, just when we need this platform. So I think this is the biggest marketing strategy that will be developed in our association, and this is the moment to show to the world what can offer. As you know, Jorge and partners, if you are not in internet, in the cloud, you don't exist. So this is the moment to improve these digital tools.
This is a very interesting approach, Gustavo, and I think it will be an amazing opportunity if in the near future we can have a Relocate Latam, Relocate Africa, even Relocate US, or even Relocate Atlantic website, because there is a lot of need from the people to know the availability of lands and offices, and the investors are looking for it. So this is an amazing, amazing initiative from your side. But I would like to go now to Eric, because we were talking about associations, we were talking about strengthening and working together on this new initiative that Gustavo just mentioned, but there is some main difference between the trade associations in the US and the trade associations outside the US. So I would like, Eric, if you could explain this to our audience a little bit more, that will be great.
Yeah, thanks, Jorge. There are some important differences the way trade associations work in the United States compared to many other countries. I often, receive delegations from zones in other countries, and a lot of the conversation focuses around we'd like NAFTZ to help us develop, economic ties with zones in the United States and sign contracts and and build business and so forth. And that's not really what we as an association do, and typically trade associations in the United States do. In that sense, our role is really fourfold. We represent the stakeholders, the community of stakeholders in the zone program, the public and private entities, the grantees, operator, users, and service providers. So we provide the collective voice for those stakeholders, both domestically and abroad. Advocacy is our second key role. We are lobbyists for the FTZ program on public policy issues impacting the program and the stakeholders. We are also a forum for education on the FTZ program's value as a tool for expanding economic development, competitiveness, employment, investment, and global supply and value chains. And we are a forum for developing best practices. And so we really do not get involved in any way in the business decisions of our stakeholders. And that includes applying for both zone status and the authority to operate in the zone. We generally don't get involved in those decisions. That those applications are made to the U.S. government. And as I said, we also do not get involved in their business decisions really at all. And I think that is an important difference, and it's a bit of a misperception about the role of both NAFTZ and trade associations in the U.S. generally. But as a representative, as the collective voice of the Foreign Trade Zone program, it does provide us the ability to build relationships with other associations. And just to expand on Ahmed's points earlier, I see that there are really three areas in which there are great opportunities that we've been working on to develop relationships with associations and zones outside the United States, and those are economic and best practices, and also benefits. You know, we have on the economic side, you know, we can help facilitate discussions, although we don't get involved in the decisions. We can facilitate discussions and programs and analyses on how the global zone system can be leveraged to help companies operate more effectively and more efficiently. So I think that developing relationships among zones from our perspective is valuable for that, and we do have cooperation agreements, for instance, with ASFA and with the Barcelona Free Zone, and we are looking to expand those collaborative relationships. Turning to best practices, you know, we have really been a very active in these discussions, both in the United States and globally. For instance, the OECD initiative on illicit trade. We've worked with the WFCO and other zones throughout the world on that initiative to ensure that zones do not become a conduit for illicit trade. We're seeing you know, a big focus on that, not only globally, but also in the United States. As you know, there's been a lot of concern, for instance, about the forced labor situation in Xinjiang in China. So we believe that that our long experience as a zones program and our emphasis on compliance and enforcement really provide help us be a resource for developing best practices globally. At the same time, you know, the WFCO is working very diligently on these issues, and we feel that they really provide a great resource to be able to coalesce the global industry into developing a very robust set of best practices. And finally, on benefits, as I mentioned, our zone program is really focused on duty benefits. Other zone systems have additional benefits to really attract foreign direct investment and jobs into their zone system. And so we're very interested to see what other zone programs are doing successfully to develop the sort of incentives that really help drive and build the zone system in their countries, and whether that might provide some useful models for us in our own country.
Thank you very much, Eric. I just want to tell you, our distinguished panelists, that I was briefed just now, and you are being seen in 32 countries in Africa, Europe, and Latin America, and of course in the US. So I mean, the ratings are super high. I'm very happy to have you here, to be part of this panel with you today. It's been an amazing, amazing opportunity. And I hope that this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, just to paraphrase Casablanca movie. And I really hope that we will meet again, maybe in Casablanca, or maybe here in Barcelona, or hopefully, or also in Washington in the near future, after all this pandemic madness is over. But thank you very much. It's been amazing to have you here, and I hope that we will be able to meet soon again. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ahmed, Eric, Gustavo, for your participation here in venue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
A pleasure. Y muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much. Merci. Shukran.
Ya está.
Pues ya está. Muchísimas gracias por tu intervención y ha sido un placer colaborar con tu equipo.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, Ana.
Gracias a todos vosotros, asistentes. Ahora vamos a pasar, después de la publicidad, con una conexión a Estació de França, donde tendrá lugar una Inspirational Talk a cargo de Marian Rojas, que hablará sobre Understanding the Brain of the of the 21st century. Vamos a entender un poco cómo ha cambiado nuestro cerebro. Hasta ahora.